Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 13. Back to Dakshineswar. On his return to Dakshineswar, Sri Ramakrishna again took charge of the worship of the Divine Mother. But after a few days, he was seized anew with the madness of God realization. The aged mother, the struggling brother, the young wife, the pecuniary condition of the family, all were forgotten in this desire for the vision of the Divine Mother. The satire, meditation, and prayer day and night, the same flushing of the chest, the same painful, burning sensation all over the body, the same repugnance to worldly matters, and the same insomnia, all reappeared. But having experienced them once, he was not worried by them now. Mothar and others became anxious, thinking that he had a relapse, and placed him again under the treatment of Kaviraj Ganga Prasad Sain, but as before with no results. Hriday took him regularly to the Kaviraj. One day, another physician of East Bengal was present when Sri Ramakrishna came. When he heard the particulars of the case, he said, "It appears from the symptoms that this is a case of divine madness. The after effect of some yogic practices and medicines will be of no use." Sri Ramakrishna himself said later on that this was the first physician to diagnose the true nature of his case. But nobody attached any importance to this statement at the time. Mothar and others went on trying new methods of treatment for Sri Ramakrishna, in spite of which the symptoms were gradually aggravating. The news of his illness slowly filtered to Kamarpukur. The anguish of Chandradevi can better be imagined than described. Finding no other way, she resolved to invoke the blessings of God through personal austerities. The Lord Shiva of Kamarpukur was famed for fulfilling the desires of his devotees. Chandradevi repaired to his temple, determined to remain there without food and water until the gracious Lord granted her prayer. In a vision, she was directed to approach the Shiva of Mukundapur, who would answer her prayer. Chandra faithfully obeyed the injunction. She had fasted and prayed for a couple of days when the great God appeared to her in a dream and said, "Do not be afraid. Your son is not mad. He is simply passing through a state of God realization." The anxious mother was consoled and, thanking the Lord, returned home. It was a momentous period in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. He was thirsty day and night for the Divine Mother. "O Mother, have pity on me. Reveal thyself to thy unworthy son. I do not want comfort, nor do I hanker after wealth or prestige. I only want thee, and thee alone," was his constant cry. Referring to this state, Sri Ramakrishna often said afterwards, "No sooner was one state transcended than another took its place. Before that whirlwind, the sacred thread was blown away. Not only that, even the wearing cloth hardly remained. Sometimes I would open my mouth, the jaws touching as it were the heavens and the nether worlds, and earnestly cry, 'Mother,' thinking I must pull her like a fisherman hauling fish with a dragnet. Oh, through what states of mind I passed in those days. Everyone thought I was mad. A slight stimulus from outside stirred the depths of my spiritual consciousness. Even a street girl appeared to me as Sita, going to greet her victorious husband. One day, I saw an English lad standing cross-legged against a tree. Immediately, the thought of Krishna was suggested to my mind, and I went into deep meditation. At one time, I would roam in the temple premises with a bamboo on my shoulder. At another time, I would feed a dog and eat the leavings. The idea of caste lost all meaning for me. A low-caste man sent me a curry cooked by his wife, which I ate with relish. In the punch of a tea, I would sit in deep meditation with my body perfectly still, losing all consciousness of the outside world. At that time, for want of proper care, my hair was matted. Birds would perch on my head and peck the grains of rice left there during the time of worship. Often, snakes would crawl over my motionless body, and neither I nor the snakes knew it. Oh, what visions flitted past my eyes day and night. About his wonderful experiences of this period, Sri Ramakrishna said, "As I sat down to meditate, I would find a sannyasin emerging from my body with a trident in hand and directing me to concentrate my mind on God, leaving aside all other thoughts. He threatened to plunge his weapon into my body if I did not do so. When the Papa Purusha, the personification of sin, came out of my body, it was the same sannyasin who killed him. When I wished to see some deities in distant places or participate in religious chantings held far off, I would see this shining figure step out of my body, go along the luminous path to those places, and re-enter my body after fulfilling the particular desires. On another occasion, Sri Ramakrishna said, "A young sannyasin exactly resembling me would come out of my body and instruct me in all matters. At those times I might retain a little outward consciousness, but more often I lost it completely in my absorption in watching the movements of this strange person. When he re-entered this body, I recovered my normal state. The ordinary man could not have borne a fraction of that tremendous fervor. His body would have shattered by a quarter of that emotion. I could forget my indescribable pangs only by seeing the mother in some form or other for the greater part of the day and night. Otherwise, this body could not have survived. For 6 years, these eyes remained wide open. Not a wink of sleep visited them. I could not close the eyelids, however much I might try to do so. I had no idea of time, nor of the body. When the mind, at rare intervals, came down to a lower plane, and I had a faint idea of the body, a shudder of pain would pass through me at the thought that I was going mad. Standing before a mirror, I would put my finger into my eyes to see if the eyelids would close, but they would not. Horrified, I would often burst into tears and pray, "Mother, is this the result of praying and wholly surrendering myself unto thee? Ah, thou hast visited me with a fell disease." But the next moment I would say, "Let it be as thou wishest. Let this body go to pieces, but leave me not. Reveal thyself to me. Be kind to thy helpless son. O Mother, I have taken shelter at thy lotus feet. Thou art my only refuge." As I prayed thus, my mind would again be stimulated. This body would seem a trifle, not worth thinking about, and the blissful mother would appear before me and console me with her gracious words. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that when in the course of spiritual practice the aspirant's mind becomes sufficiently purified, it acts as the guru. In the light of this statement, we can understand to a certain extent the meaning of his extraordinary vision about the double coming out of his body. It betokened a high degree of concentration, where the contents of the mind took a concrete form and lived and moved like an embodied being. One of his sadhanas of this interesting period consisted in banishing from his mind all attachment to wealth. Sitting on the bank of the Ganges, he took some earth in one hand and a few rupees in the other, weighing their value mentally as he passed them from hand to hand. Money, he said to himself, can at best give only a comfortable living and some facilities for charity. That is all. It cannot give realization of God, which is the only thing worth having in life. Hence, it has no more real value than this handful of earth. Firmly impressing this idea on his mind, he finally consigned both to the Ganges. Again, for the complete effacement of a sense of superiority from his mind, he washed unclean places like an ordinary sweeper, viewing alike all objects of the world as but modifications of matter. Following out this idea, he taught his mind to regard sandal paste and filth as the same, and he would touch them both with equal indifference. Mathar's regard for Sri Ramakrishna was deepening day by day. He was ever careful about his comforts, as the following incident will show. One day, Sri Ramakrishna entered one of the Shiva temples at Dakshineswar and began to recite the Mahimna Stotra, a beautiful hymn in praise of Shiva. Soon he was overpowered with emotion at the thought of his great glory and forgot the world. Coming to a particularly beautiful stanza in which the glories of the Lord are declared as altogether indescribable, his feeling rose to a climax, and he was brought face to face, as it were, with the great God. He no longer remembered the order of the lines or the stanzas composing the hymn, and even forgot its language. "O Lord, how can I describe thy infinite glory?" were the only words that came from his lips. Tears began to flow profusely from his eyes. His strange conduct caused people to gather around him, though he was not conscious of them. Mathur, who happened to be present at Dakshineswar, hurried to the spot. He stood by, mutely watching the spectacle. An officious employee suggested that this madman be removed from the proximity of the deity, whereupon Mathur said that anyone touching Sri Ramakrishna would do so at his peril. This silenced the men present. After a long time, Sri Ramakrishna gradually recovered normal consciousness. He was astonished to see so many people looking at him. Seeing Mathur, he asked him in a childlike way if he had done anything wrong in a state of unconsciousness. "Oh no," replied Mathur. "You were only reciting a hymn, and I stood here to see that nobody disturbed you." Sometime after this, a remarkable incident happened which greatly increased Mathur's regard for Sri Ramakrishna. One day, in a long veranda on the east side of his room, the latter was pacing to and fro, absorbed in deep thought. Mathur was seated alone in his room, whence he could have a good view of the master. For a long time he watched, the latter not being at all conscious that he was being observed. Suddenly an unexpected thing happened. Mathur ran to him, prostrated himself, and began to weep like a child at his feet. Sri Ramakrishna was taken aback and said, "What is this? You are the son-in-law of Rani Rasmani. What will people think if they see you behave like this? Be calm and get up." But Mathur still wept. When he regained his composure a little, he explained the reason for his emotions. "I watched you as you were pacing in the veranda. When you went one way, I saw you in the form of the blissful mother. When you turned in the opposite direction, you took on the form of the Lord Shiva. At first, I thought it was hallucination. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but to my astonishment, every time I saw the same phenomenon." As he spoke, Mathur wept, so overwhelmed was he with emotion. "But I know nothing of it," reiterated the master in his characteristic way. Referring to this incident, he said later on, Mathur would not be comforted at the time. "I felt nervous lest Rani Rasmani should learn of it and think I had hypnotized him." Then he would add, "Was it for nothing that Mathur respected and looked so much after the comforts of this body?" Meaning himself? Mother showed him many wonderful things time and again. It was written in his horoscope that his Ishta, chosen deity, would be always gracious unto him, nay, would move in flesh and blood with him. After this, Mathur's regard and devotion increased 1,000-fold. Henceforth, he counted it as a rare privilege to be of the least service to the master, and always complied with his wishes. And we shall see later on how he was intimately associated with a great part of the master's subsequent sadhanas. We now come to a noteworthy event in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. It was the death of Rani Rasmani, which took place on the 19th of February, 1861. Before passing away, she had the satisfaction of seeing two of her great desires fulfilled, namely, the consecration of the temple at Dakshineswar and a permanent arrangement for its future efficient management. The part she had to play in the divine drama of which Sri Ramakrishna was the hero was done, and the time was come for her exit. She fell ill with fever and stomach trouble, which developed into a chronic dysentery of a serious type. It is said that her last days were embittered by the refusal of her eldest daughter, Padmamani Dasi, to sign the document waiving her claims to the property of the Kali temple. A few days before her death, Rani Rasmani was taken to her house at Kalighat on the bank of the sacred Adiganga. Shortly before her death, she was brought to the Ganges. Seeing some lamps lighted before her, she exclaimed, "Remove those lights. How tame they look now. Ah, my mother is coming. The halo of her form has illumined the whole place." After a slight pause, she said, "Mother, art thou come?" "Well," Padma refused to sign. "Will that do any harm, mother?" Uttering these words, she passed away quietly, and her soul, leaving behind the fret and fever of this world, soared high into divine realms. On the death of Rani Rasmani, Mathur became the sole executor of the estate. He sought to place himself unreservedly at the disposal of the master, and since his great vision, it was his one desire to live always near him. Not only would he arrange the trips which Sri Ramakrishna desired to make, but would often, as in the case of his visit to the Panahati fair, go himself in disguise with a few attendants to look after him. On the eve of his embarking on a varied course of sadhana, Sri Ramakrishna felt the necessity of support from someone who could supply him with the requisites for those practices. He even prayed to the mother for such a one. Later on, the master spoke of Mothur as the first of the 5 supporters, engaged for him by the Divine Mother. Whenever any desire arose in his mind, he would speak of it to Mothur, who was only too glad to fulfill it at once. At the same time, Sri Ramakrishna was very kind to Mothur. Yet, on questions of vital importance, where some principle was at stake, he never yielded to the latter or hesitated to say what he deemed to be the right thing. His treatment of Mothur was characterized by a spirit of independence, as well as of simplicity. It never occurred to him to try to curry favor, for he knew that the omniscient mother would in time fulfill his desires. One day, some ornaments were stolen from the images of the deities in the Radhakanta temple. Mothur heard of it, and in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, apostrophized the gods. "Ah, you were powerless to protect your own ornaments from the thief." This at once elicited a rebuke from the master, who said, "What nonsense you speak! God cares very little for these clods of earth which you call jewels. They are precious to you, not to him, for is not Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, at his feet?" Mothur one day proposed to Sri Ramakrishna that he would set apart a large estate in his name. At this, Sri Ramakrishna thundered, "What? Do you intend to make me a worldly man?" Mothur often invited him to his residence at John Bazaar and spent many delightful days with him there. In the evenings, he would take him out for a drive. He brought costly utensils of gold and silver for the use of the master, and many costly robes. But Sri Ramakrishna remained the same child of the Divine Mother, perfectly unattached. One day, a very expensive shawl was purchased for him. He took it cheerfully and like a boy showed it to others. But his discriminating mind soon began to argue. What is there in it? Nothing but goat's wool. Like every other thing, it is also a modification of matter. It protects one from cold, no doubt, but this can be done as well by a blanket or quilt. And like other material things, it does not help one to realize God. Rather, it makes its owner assume an air of superiority. He thinks himself rich and is proud. So it takes a man away from God. As he was weighing thus in his mind the evils which the shawl was likely to produce, he threw the beautiful shawl on the ground and began to trample and spit on it. Not content with this, he was about to burn it when someone rescued it. On hearing of the incident, Mothur said with a smile that it was well done. Mothur had a family priest in the Kalighat temple named Chandrahaldar. For some days, he had been noticing Mothur's devotion to Sri Ramakrishna. Wishing to monopolize the rich man's favor, he was alarmed to find a competitor in the field. He determined to put a stop to it. One day, Sri Ramakrishna lay in an outer room of Mothur's John Bazaar house in a half-conscious state when the priest suddenly came in. There was no one nearby. The man pushed the master several times and said, "Well, tell me how you hypnotized Mothur Babu." Sri Ramakrishna kept silent, for he had not the power to speak then. The priest, getting no answer to his repeated queries, was exasperated and kicked the master thrice before he went away. Sri Ramakrishna knew what the consequences would be if the matter were reported to Mothur, so he kept it to himself. Mothur used to be quite impressed with Sri Ramakrishna's invulnerable purity and simplicity in all circumstances, and found him to be absolutely proof against lust and wealth. I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.